So here it says, what would it be like to be free from limitations and soar beyond your boundaries? What can you do each day to find this kind of inner peace and freedom? The Untethered Soul offers a simple, profoundly intuitive answer to these questions. Whether this is your first exploration of inner space or you're devoted your life to the inward journey, this book will transform your relationship with yourself and the world around you. And yeah, I'd say, this definitely for anybody brand new to this stuff, brand new to exploring mindfulness, meditation, a little bit less so. When you read his his second book, The Surrender Experiment, he talks much more about his meditative practice and how that led to it. Within the Untethered Soul, there isn't actually that much information about the practice itself. It's more about the mindset that we need to undertake when starting to gain back control over our minds and stopping it from no longer allowing us to toss us around. Sorry, no longer allowing it to toss us around as we're going about our day-to-day life. That's really much more the focus of this book, is going through each day with this mentality of I'm releasing my attachment to things that don't matter, which is, the vast majority of things. How do I tune into my true self, to my higher self? How do I allow all these things that Michael Singer calls blockages? How do I allow the blockages to kind of pass through? So anything that triggers us, whether it's excuse me, somebody in traffic yelling at you, someone at the grocery store being rude, your own family being snappy at you, your immature parents triggering you, whatever it is that's going on, what can we do internally, right? That doesn't depend on the externals, right? On what's happening outside of ourselves. What can we do internally to fill our lives with more acceptance and joy and stillness? Right. And so oftentimes the answer to that is to release our attachment to the past, right? Both the past and the future, right? The past, we cannot live again. We cannot change. So whatever value we can squeeze out of it through reflection, introspection, right? Self-correction, whatever we can pull out of it to just do that part, right? Which takes us, not very long. When you think about having a memory that lasts with you for months or for many of us, years and decades, right? How do we squeeze the value out of that memory quickly, right? So you did something embarrassing. Is there something to take away from that? Did you do something that goes against your values or was against somebody else, right? And so squeezing that value, whatever that lesson is, if there is one there, but then letting it go, right? Don Miguel Ruiz of the Four Agreements, Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, they all talk about this idea of the past being a bottomless pit, that the more we go back into it, the more we're going to find, the less we're going to be able to kind of push forward. And so you could take that with a grain of salt, because there's definitely the argument for going back into the past and excavating, doing the work. I think what they would tell you is if that's what you're going to do, then just do that. Just go in there, excavate, do the work, get whatever goodness you want out of it, but then let that go so you can come back to present. Same goes for the future, right? All our planning, all our worrying, all our catastrophizing, all that stuff is about a future. And we know from our past doing it that future often, in most situations, never comes, right? That catastrophe that we're waiting for, that unfortunate event that we're waiting for, that we're expecting, most of the time, those things don't come to pass. But what we've done in the meantime is we've darkened our entire present, which is all that we have to live in, right? So we've used the past and the future to kind of keep us in this prison of the present, where we're not really there at all. We're not really present whatsoever. We're either living in the past or we're living in the future. And so the big kind of game of the Untethered Soul is, how do we do that? How do we let go of that, the future and past thinking, come into present and focus on what we have in front of us right here, right? What we have inside of us and in front of us, right? And so that's just like a quick overview, but I wanted to read you a couple of sections that will be able to kind of highlight these ideas much more much more profoundly than maybe I can. So he says here, if you spend some time observing this mental voice, the first thing you will notice is that it never shuts up. When left to its own, it just talks, right? We're talking about our internal voice or the internal roommate now. Imagine if you were to see someone walking around constantly talking to himself. You'd think he was strange. You'd wonder if he's the one who's talking and he's the one who's listening. He obviously knows what's going to be said before he says it. So what's the point? The same is true for the voice inside your head. Why is it talking? It's you who's talking and it's you who's listening. And when the voice argues with itself, who is it arguing with? Who could possibly win? It gets very confusing. And so Eckhart Tolle spoke about this as far as his own awakening experience. He doesn't talk about it in The Power of Now, but he talks about it in interviews when he's done interviews about The Power of Now. Actually, he does talk about this. Never mind. I just remember he does talk about it in The Power of Now. He says that when one day he was just so fed up because before Eckhart was, the Eckhart we know, he was just so fed up with himself, and he said in a spiral of kind of these negative feelings and depression, he was lying at home one night and just thinking to himself about ending it all. And he said, I just can't live with myself anymore. And then he had kind of this moment of realization, of awareness. He's like, who can't live with who? When I say I can't live with myself anymore, that implies two separate beings. So which one am I and who can't live with who, and why can't they live with one another? And so that was the beginning of his process of awakening, of coming into the moment and recognizing there's something else going on here that is outside of my understanding, and that is not necessarily my true self, because I can see clearly there are already, just based on this one sentence, there's two selves in here, right? The me that I can't live with and the me that is unable to live with that me, right? And so that set him off on the whole journey of the power of now. So he says, so Michael Singer here in The Untethered Soul, he says, the best way to free yourself from this incessant chatter, and that's the chatter inside our heads, right? The voice we think is us, right? We've heard that voice our entire life. And so now we think, hey, I hear it in my head. That must mean it's me, right? And this book, The Power of Now, so many books like it, kind of are here to point out that that's not you. Just because you hear it in your head doesn't make it you. And then the next question that people have immediately after that is then, so who am I? And the answer that they give, Eckhart and Michael Singer and Buddhists and John Kabat-Zinn, the answer they give to the question, if I am not the voice in my head, then who am I? Is I am the one who watches it. I'm the one who sees that. I'm the one who observes it. And so if you want to kind of practice, as if this is your first introduction to this kind of mindfulness practice, and you want to practice, one thing that he says in this book to do is to say hello to yourself inside your head. Just repeat it a few times. Hello, 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 right? Then make it shout inside, then make it whisper inside. And as you're doing that, notice that it's the same voice you hear all day, every day that you think is you. But if you're the one controlling it, right? If you're the one making it quiet, making it loud, then how can it possibly be you? You are the one with the intention behind it. And so that's kind of like the first introduction to this idea that I'm not the voice in my head. I'm the one who hears it, right? So he goes on to say, the best way to free yourself from this incessant chatter of your mind is to step back and view it objectively. Just view the voice as a vocalizing mechanism that is capable of making it appear like someone is in there talking to you. Don't think about it, just notice it. No matter what the voice is saying, it's all the same. It doesn't matter if it's saying nice things or mean things, worldly things or spiritual things. It doesn't matter because it's still just a voice talking inside your head. In fact, the only way to get your distance from this voice is to stop differentiating what it's saying. Stop feeling that one thing it says is you and the other thing it says is not you. If you're hearing it talk, it's obviously not you. You are the one who hears the voice. You are the one who notices that it's talking. Love that. And so that's our job when it comes to, as far as the teachings of the Untethered Soul, the Power of Now, the Four Agreements. That's really our job, is to bring awareness to what is actually happening inside, right? To be able to sit back and observe, what is my mind doing right now? right? What is it saying? What is it causing me to feel? What sensations are coming up? Just observe, just observe, just observe, right? Not trying to change anything, not wishing things were different. Those are all actions of the mind, the same mind we're trying to build separation from. And so the whole ball game, as far as this book is concerned, is to disconnect from that mind from that voice in the mind, and to simply observe it. Just notice what it's doing, and through that practice, we start to find over time that we start to have some control over it, right? Because the next time we're in a very triggering situation and the voice comes up and is throwing around some rage, some anger, some frustration, we notice it because we've practiced, quote unquote, in times of peace, right? When do the Marines train? They train in times of peace so that when it's time for war, they are ready for it. Same with us, right? We train observing the mind in the way that this book and many books like it teach. We observe it during kind of our everyday life in order to train ourselves so when we're at the grocery store and someone cuts in front of us in line, we don't get immediately triggered. We observe the trigger, right? We observe the sensations in our body of feeling like yelling or like saying something rude or even just suffering internally about it, right? We've all had those experiences where we spend kind of one person says one thing that we don't even know for sure is against us, but they say it in a way that we think, oh, maybe this person was being rude. And now we've spent, the whole day, maybe even the next day, the next week, having that little voice in our head over and over, right? And it's like the big question becomes why? How does that help us? What value are we getting out of this experience? And the answer is none, obviously. We know that, right? And so the question becomes, how do I disconnect from that voice? Since I know that voice is going to exist, right? And meditation doesn't say you get rid of that voice entirely. Maybe after years and decades of doing the work, some people get there. But for the vast majority of us, it isn't about getting rid of the voice. It's just about hearing it from an outside perspective when it starts doing the things that we don't necessarily agree with or don't want to do or want to do less of, right? It's about coming into the presence, hearing, oh, I'm feeling very triggered right now, or I'm feeling very bored or tired or upset. And so my voice, my internal roommate is going off, right? It's making me remember all these things that gave me shame a long time ago. Every time I try and start a new business, there's this voice in my head telling me it's not going to work. I should just go back to school, or I should go, get that job that my parents want, right? That voice inside, all it wants is to keep us small and to keep us safe. And it's not doing it it's not trying to harm us in any way, right? It's doing it as a self-protective mechanism. Somewhere early in life, usually, early in childhood, usually, we have learned some of these lessons, like I need to stay small in order to be safe, or I need to be for others in order to be loved. All these little lessons we take on as children, and we kind of continue carrying them in adulthood when they no longer serve us. And until we start to build this separation between me and my mind, we don't have the space necessary to disconnect from that voice and to recognize just because my mind says something doesn't mean it's true, and it doesn't mean that I have to listen to it, right? And so this is that work. This is the work of disconnecting from the voice inside the head and recognizing that just because I hear it doesn't make it true. And I tell myself that now, even, decades after starting this work, I tell myself that all the time because it still lives in there. That voice inside your head will continue to live there. It's not the work isn't getting rid of it. It's to disconnect from it and to hear it from an outside perspective. And Michael Singer talks a lot about this, about zooming out and becoming kind of this voice observing the voice, right? To just zoom out, to be in the back of your head. He constantly taps, if you watch him in interviews, he constantly kind of taps the back of his head or right above behind his head and says, you are back here. You're not the one at the forefront that are having the thoughts, that are having the sensations, right? That's the body, that's the mind. But you, your true essence, the higher self, is back here, tapping the back of his head, right? You're the one who sits back here and can observe it. You can sit in the throne of your awareness and observe what is going on, right? And that gives you enough space with enough practice, that gives you enough space to disconnect from it and to make your own independent decisions. Viktor Frankl of Man's Search for Meaning, another incredible book. I don't know where it is right now. I usually have it at the ready, but in Man's Search for Meaning, he says, between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. In that space rests our growth and freedom. Meaning it's not the things that happen, and it's not the things that happen that really impact us or define us. It's what happens in that space between the thing happened and what I do with it. That's where real growth, real freedom, real power rests. In that small little moment between me feeling the sensation of whatever the event is and then deciding what to do with it. We can't avoid the sensation, right? Somebody cuts you off, you instantly are triggered, right? Or whatever the triggering event is for you, it happens instantaneously. We can't control it. It's just part of being human. But the question is, what do we do with it? If I lean into it, if I honk at the guy, if I put my head out the window and start shouting profanities, whatever it is, right? That means that the impulse has control. I didn't have control of that because when I sit back and think about it, I'd probably feel like, well, there's no point in that. It's not helping anything. It just potentially leads to bigger problems, right? So if I'm listening from my higher self, I might recognize, hey, that had nothing to do with me. That was about them. They were having a rough day, et cetera, et cetera. And let me come back to center. Let me do my breathing. Let me do my distracting, whatever strategies you need to use or whatever work best for you. Let me employ that so that I can go about my day and just leave this where it was, right? And just continue being where my feet are, as the meditation saying goes. And so that's the work of it, is in disconnecting from that mind that's saying, be triggered, be triggered, be triggered, and to kind of bring that sensation back to center, breathe through it, and kind of recalibrate. That's the work that we're trying to do here. Not get rid of the thought or the sensation or the impulse, but to be the second line of defense. What do I do with that? I tell my son all the time this, we can't control getting mad, but we can control what we do with that anger, right? And so this is the work of that. How do we disconnect from that voice, and how do we build this kind of understanding that I'm not the thoughts that I hear? And here's the exercise I was just talking about. You do hear it when it talks, don't you, right? Meaning the voice in your head. Make it say hello right now. Say it over and over a few times, right? So just say the word hello inside your head. Hello, 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 hello. Now shout it inside. Can you hear yourself saying hello inside? Of course you can. There is a voice talking, and there's you who notices the voice talking. And literally that's the entire thing. Like if you just took that line, you'd get 90% or some random percentage of the teachings of this book is in recognizing there is a voice talking, and there's you who notices the voice talking. That's literally half or a big part of the work here. The problem is that it's easy to notice the voice saying hello, but it's difficult to see that no matter what the voice says, it's still just a voice talking and you listening. You, the true you, right? There's absolutely nothing that the voice says or that the voice can say that is more you than anything else it says. Suppose you were looking at three objects, a flower pot, a photograph, and a book, and were then asked which of these three objects is you. You'd say none of them. I'm the one who's looking at what you're putting in front of me. It doesn't matter what you put in front of me. It's always going to be me looking at it. You see, it's an act of subject and object. Subject perceiving various objects down here. This is one of my favorite passages of the entire book, and it comes, on page 11, so right up front. This first third of this book is incredible. You'll see just endless highlights in the first, throughout the book, but especially in the first part. There's just so much insight and goodness there. And this is one of my favorite parts of the entire book. There is nothing more important to true growth than realizing, and that's why it's my favorite, because it distills once again kind of the core message of this book. And he's not saying one of the things. He says there is nothing, right? Notice how he's starting that paragraph. There is nothing more important to true growth than realizing that you are not the voice of the mind. You are the one who hears it. If you don't understand this, you will try to figure out which of the many things the voice says is really you. People go through so many changes in the name of trying to find myself. They want to discover which of these voices, which of these aspects of their personality is who they really are. The answer is simple: none of them. If you spend your time hoping that it doesn't rain tomorrow, you are wasting your time. Your thoughts don't change the rain. You will someday come to see that there is no use for that incessant internal chatter, and there's no reason to constantly attempt to figure everything out. Eventually, you will see that the real cause of the problems is not life itself, it's the commotion of the mind, it's the commotion the mind makes about life that really causes the problem. Love that. So good. Oh, I see there's a couple of you in here. Say hello, please. I'm just kind of testing out YouTube Live. I've never done it on here before. So if you're here for the first time, please say hello. Let me know where you're tuning in from. Most of the time we do our streaming on TikTok. So if you like these, I'll do more on YouTube, but also you can follow on TikTok, the Academy of Self-Help. We do a lot more streaming there. We'll start bringing some of those over here. What I do like about TikTok is that we've built up a nice community where there's a lot of people chatting. So it lets me kind of bounce back and forth between the reading and answering questions and talking to people. So I'd love to start building that here. I'd love anybody who's willing to say hello and chat. I'd love to hear from you. In some cases, the mental voice talks for the same reason that a tea kettle whistles. That is, there's a buildup of energy inside that needs to be released. If you watch objectively, you will see that when there's a buildup of nervous, fearful, or desired base energies inside, the voice becomes extremely active. The narration makes you feel more comfortable with the world around you. It makes you feel as though things are more in your control. And so that answers the question of why do we hear the voice? Because it's a way for us to feel safe. And he talks about, I don't know if it's right here or later in the book, he talks about this idea of when you're out in the cold, your mind will start telling you about how cold it is, right? And he asks, why? What's the point of telling me how cold it is? I'm the one out here experiencing it. I know it's cold. So what's the use of my mind just going on and on about how cold it is? And his answer is that it gives you a sense of control. Because as soon as you hear the mind say it's cold, you can start, having more mind and having a discussion within yourself, talking about, it's only so far to go. We're almost home. It's not that cold compared to last year. All these different things that are essentially just a way for us to gain control over an uncontrollable, which is the weather in that example, right? And so we do that as a way to control things, but the realization that he tries to stress is that we don't need that control, right? We don't even have it regardless, right? It's just talk inside our head. So it's not like we actually have any control. No matter what I say to myself inside my head, I'm still cold, right? It's still cold outside. That doesn't change. And so the idea is to let go of that need to control everything and to be okay with the fact that it's cold and I can't do anything about it. And if I can, from the power of now, if I don't like the situation, what I can do is I can change the situation or I can accept it. And so if I'm walking out in the cold and there's nothing I can do about it, or if I don't like it, I have a couple of options. I can deal with it. I can go inside. I can start running while I'm out there so I warm up. And if I'm not willing or not able to take any countermeasures to change it, then my only other option is to accept it, right? To realize I'm walking, it's cold, right? Not I'm cold, but it's cold. Not I'm depressed, but there is depression. Not I'm angry, but there is anger, right? Separating the emotions from our true self, because it's not one thing. It's our emotions are like clouds going through the sky, right? The clouds go and they seem to be a part of it, but at the end of the day, they're going to pass through, they're going to dissipate, and what's going to be left? The sky, right? The sky's always there above the clouds. And so that's kind of how we have to see ourselves. Like, I'm the sky, and the thoughts, the emotions, the sensations, those are just the clouds. They're going to come through, they're going to stay a while. They might even, block out the sun and make it dark and darker and colder, but eventually they're going to pass through. And all I have to do is to sit within that discomfort, if there's discomfort there. Ideally later in life, later in our practice, we want to get to a point where we're not experiencing as much of the discomfort, right? We're not attaching ourselves to how our body feels or what our mind is saying. But at first, we can just decide, if there's suffering here, then that's fine. Then I'm going to suffer. I'm going to be cold. I'm not willing to take any countermeasures. There's nothing I can do about it. So let me just be cold, but let me do it from an accepting place. Let me not add suffering to my suffering by going internally and complaining and whining about it and all these things, right? Let me just be accepting of my experience and not add suffering to my suffering. And maybe we'll end on this for today. And make sure to hit that follow button if you'd like to join us for the next one. He says, you will come to see that the mind talks all the time because you gave it a job to do. You use it as a protection mechanism, a form of defense. Ultimately, it makes you feel more secure. True personal growth is about transcending the part of you that is not okay and needs protection. That is done by constantly remembering that you are the one inside that notices the voice talking. That is the way out. The one inside who is aware that you are always talking to yourself about yourself is always silent. It is a doorway to the depths of your being. To be aware that you are watching the voice talk is to stand on the threshold of a fantastic inner journey. If used properly, the same mental voice that has been the source of worry, distraction, and general neuroses can become the launching ground for true spiritual awakening. Come to know the one who watches the voice, and you will come to know one of the great mysteries of creation. Amazing. And so that's a little bit of the introduction of the untethered soul, right? This disconnection from the voice inside the head and kind of reconnection to the true self, which is kind of the last little bit that he spoke about there. That is the one inside who is aware that you are always talking to yourself about yourself is always silent. And Dr. Lindsay Gibson, who you might be familiar with from her great book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, she talks about that too in her first book, Who You Were Meant to Be. In that book, she talks about this idea that we have she calls it the still small voice inside our head, right? And it gives us messages and signals in a much calmer, much quieter, much more declarative statements than kind of the rest of the ongoing inside our mind, the voice inside the mind, right? The voice inside our mind, excuse me, of the inner critic, is often loud, it's aggressive, it talks a lot, right? We hear it all the time, whereas our true self or the still small voice is either silent completely, as Michael Singer says, or as Dr. Lindsay Gibson talks about, very quiet. It speaks in, you should do that, or don't do that, or start writing, or, very short, quiet, still, declarative, without judgment, without shame, without guilt, right? And so the whole game is to disconnect from the loud voice, the false self that we hear around the clock, and to reconnect either with the complete stillness, if you agree with Michael Singer's take on it, or with that very quiet, still, small voice that kind of continuously operates beneath the surface. And so that's the game for us, is to continue building that connection to that voice, right? The still small voice, or to disconnect from all voices, as Michael Singer recommends, and to just live in complete presence. Once again, Eckhart Tolle talks endlessly about this, to just be present, and anything that you hear inside your mind, know that that's not part of your true self. That's just the false self, the ego, the inner roommate kind of masquerading as us. Right, so we have to build that disconnection and that recognition that I'm not the voice inside my head. I'm the one who sees that. And so that's it for today. Thank you guys for hanging out on this little tester of YouTube. Make sure to follow, and if you'd like more, as I said, on our TikTok, the same name, the Academy of Self-Help, we do a lot more of these streams. So if you enjoyed this, feel free to let me know. Send me a DM here or Instagram or TikTok. Say hello. Hopefully next time we'll get a couple of people chatting in here. I'd love to hear from you. All right. And have an awesome rest of your day. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love, everybody. Have a great, great day.